A different kind of night. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm, golden hues over the bustling city. Inside the elegant restaurant Seraphine, the gentle hum of chatter blended seamlessly with the soft notes of a live violinist stationed in the corner. The space was immaculate, an elegant dance of vintage charm and modern sophistication. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the room with a soft glow, casting playful shadows on polished wooden tables adorned with pristine white linens. Behind the scenes, Sarah walked through the restaurant with an effortless calm that belied her years of hard work. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple bun, and her neatly pressed uniform blended seamlessly with those of her staff. On the surface, she appeared to be just another waitress, a smiling face among many in the busy establishment. But in truth, Sarah was far more than that. She was the owner, the driving force behind Seraphine, a restaurant she had built from the ground up with sheer determination and unwavering resolve. As she adjusted the placement of a chair at one of the reserved tables, she glanced around the dining room. The place was nearly at capacity, filled with regular patrons and newcomers alike. Each detail, from the perfect alignment of silverware to the warmth of the candlelight, was a testament to Sarah's vision of creating a space where everyone, regardless of background, felt valued. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sharp ding of the front door opening. Sarah turned toward the entrance, a polite smile already gracing her lips. But as the woman stepped in, Sarah felt an immediate shift in the atmosphere. The usual warmth of the room seemed to flicker, replaced by a cool unease. The woman entered with the confidence of someone used to commanding attention. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor, echoing louder than necessary. She wore an expensive designer dress that hugged her frame perfectly, and her hair was styled with meticulous precision. A pair of oversized sunglasses perched atop her head despite the late hour. On her arm dangled a glossy handbag adorned with golden accents that caught the light with every step. Sarah's practiced smile remained steady, but she instinctively knew this would not be a routine interaction. The woman's gaze swept over the restaurant with barely concealed disdain, her lips tightening as though she found the establishment beneath her. "I need a table," the woman announced, her tone clipped and impatient. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm and welcoming. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to Seraphine. Do you have a reservation?" The woman tilted her head, her eyes narrowing, as though the question was an insult. "Do I look like someone who needs a reservation?" Sarah maintained her composure, gesturing toward the bustling dining area. "We're quite full tonight, but I'd be happy to add your name to our waiting list. It shouldn't take long." The woman scoffed audibly, her manicured fingers tapping against the side of her handbag. "You expect me to wait? Do you even know who I am?" Sarah kept her tone even. "I apologize for the inconvenience, ma'am. We'll do our best to accommodate you as soon as possible." Unbelievable. The woman's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby diners. She glanced pointedly at a couple being escorted to their table, her expression soaring further. "You're seating them ahead of me." "They have a reservation," Sarah explained patiently. The woman's eyes flashed with irritation. "This is supposed to be a high-class restaurant, and yet here I am being treated like a common nobody." Sarah suppressed a sigh, her professionalism unwavering. "If you prefer, I can offer you a seat at the bar while you wait." "I don't wait," the woman snapped, her voice slicing through the air like a knife. She stepped closer to Sarah, lowering her voice but sharpening her words. "And frankly, I don't know how someone like you managed to get a job here. You don't exactly fit the image of sophistication this place is obviously trying to fake." A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. Some diners exchanged uneasy glances, while others stared openly, waiting to see how Sarah would respond. For a moment, Sarah's jaw tightened, but she quickly steadied herself. Years of dealing with difficult customers had taught her the value of composure. "I'm sorry you feel that way, ma'am," she said softly. "I assure you, we're doing everything we can to meet everyone's needs." The woman smirked, crossing her arms. Well, clearly your best isn't good enough. I want to speak to the manager. Now. The restaurant fell silent. Even the violinist faltered, his bow hovering uncertainly over the strings. All eyes were on Sarah as she straightened her posture, meeting the woman's glare with quiet determination. Of course, Sarah said, her voice calm but firm. Please wait here, and I'll get the manager for you. The woman gave an exaggerated sigh, stepping back with an air of smug satisfaction. Finally, she muttered. Sarah turned, her steps deliberate as she walked toward the bar. A young busboy, Danny, met her halfway. Concern etched across his face. Are you okay, Miss Sarah? He whispered. She offered him a reassuring smile. I'm fine, Danny. Just give me a moment. Taking a deep breath, Sarah adjusted her posture and smoothed her apron. When she returned to the entrance, the woman was waiting with an impatient scowl, her fingers tapping rhythmically against her handbag. Well? The woman demanded. Sarah met her gaze evenly, her voice steady as she spoke. You're speaking to the manager. I'm Sarah. I own this restaurant. The woman's expression froze. For a split second, her confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. But she quickly masked it with indignation. You can't be serious, she said, her tone incredulous. You're the owner. I am, Sarah replied evenly. And I'd like to remind you that Seraphine operates on principles of respect for our guests and our staff alike. If that's not something you can abide by, I'll have to ask you to leave. The woman's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Around them, patrons watched with barely concealed interest, their expressions a mix of approval and curiosity. You'll regret this, the woman hissed, her voice low and venomous. But she offered no further argument. With a final glare, she turned on her heel and stormed out, her heels clicking furiously against the floor. As the door swung shut behind her, a tentative round of applause broke out among the diners. It grew steadily louder, until nearly the entire restaurant was clapping. Sarah gave a small nod of acknowledgement, her smile faint but genuine. She turned to the staff, offering them a reassuring glance before resuming her duties. Behind her composed exterior, Sarah felt her heart racing. The confrontation had been draining, but it had also reaffirmed something she had always known. Seraphine was more than just a restaurant. It was a testament to resilience, a space built on dignity and respect. And no one, no matter how entitled, could take that away. As the evening unfolded and the restaurant returned to its usual rhythm, Sarah's thoughts lingered on the encounter. She had faced many challenges on her journey, but something about the woman's venomous words stuck with her. There was a bitterness in them that hinted at something deeper, a story untold. Little did Sarah know, the story was far from over. Whispers of shadows. The morning after the confrontation, sunlight poured through the windows of Sarah's small apartment above the restaurant. She sat at her modest kitchen table, sipping a cup of coffee and reflecting on the events of the previous night. Though she had handled the situation with professionalism, the woman's sharp words had left an impression. Not because they hurt her, Sarah had long since grown a thick skin, but because of the venom behind them. The woman, whoever she was, seemed driven not just by entitlement, but by something deeper, something personal. Setting her cup down, Sarah turned her attention to the stack of papers on her table. It was payroll day, and she prided herself on handling every detail personally. Each check represented not just her staff's hard work, but the life they were building. To Sarah, her employees were more than workers. They were family. Many of them had come to her during difficult times, and she had offered them not just jobs, but second chances. She thought of Danny, the young busboy who had lost his parents in an accident and was saving for college. Or Donna, the single mother who worked double shifts to support her daughter. They weren't just her team. They were her reason for continuing. As she worked through the numbers, a knock at her door broke her concentration. Frowning, she stood and crossed the small space to answer it. Outside stood Nate, one of her senior servers. His expression was a mix of curiosity and concern. "Hey, boss," he said, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "Sorry to bother you so early, but there's something you might want to see." Sarah arched an eyebrow. "What's going on?" That woman from last night," Nate said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "She's outside the restaurant, just sitting in a car." Sarah's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "She's been parked there since before sunrise," Nate explained. "I thought maybe it was a coincidence, but she's definitely watching the place." Sarah's stomach tightened. She wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but the idea of someone lurking outside her business didn't sit well. She grabbed her jacket and followed Nate downstairs. Sure enough, a sleek black car was parked across the street, its tinted windows glinting in the sunlight. From where she stood, she could just make out the silhouette of a figure in the driver's seat. "Do you think she's planning something?" Nate asked, his tone edged with unease. Sarah crossed her arms, her mind racing. "I don't know, but let's not assume the worst just yet. Go back inside and keep things running. I'll handle this." Nate hesitated but nodded, retreating into the restaurant. Sarah waited a moment, then crossed the street with measured steps. As she approached the car, the window rolled down, revealing the same woman from the night before. But this time, she looked different. Gone was the air of smug superiority. Her makeup was minimal, her designer outfit replaced by a simple blouse and jeans. Her eyes, however, held the same intensity, though there was a flicker of something else. Uncertainty. "Good morning," Sarah said evenly, stopping a few feet away. "Can I help you with something?" The woman hesitated, as if weighing her words. Finally, she sighed and ran a hand through her carefully styled hair. "I wanted to apologize," she said, her voice softer than Sarah had expected. Sarah blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Apologize?" "Yes," the woman said, her gaze dropping to her hands gripping the steering wheel. "About last night. I wasn't myself." Sarah tilted her head, studying the woman carefully. "You seemed pretty certain of yourself at the time." The woman flinched at the remark, but nodded. "I deserved that," she admitted. "Look, I know I was out of line. I let my frustrations get the better of me, and I took it out on you. That was wrong." For a moment, Sarah didn't reply. The apology was unexpected, but something about the woman's tone gave her pause. It didn't feel rehearsed or insincere. Still, Sarah wasn't one to let people off the hook easily. "I appreciate the apology," Sarah said cautiously. "But why are you here now? You could have called or sent an email. Sitting outside my restaurant all morning doesn't exactly scream sincerity." The woman flushed, glancing away. "I didn't know how else to approach you. After the way I acted, I figured you'd just hang up if I called." Sarah folded her arms, her skepticism growing. "You didn't strike me as the type to worry about rejection." The woman let out a humorless laugh. "Well, appearances can be deceiving, can't they?" There was something in her voice, a vulnerability that hadn't been there the night before. It intrigued Sarah, despite herself. She decided to give the woman a chance, if only to satisfy her own curiosity. "Why don't you come inside?" Sarah offered, gesturing toward the restaurant. "We can talk over a cup of coffee." The woman looked surprised but nodded. "I'd like that." Inside Seraphine, the morning rush was just beginning. The staff moved efficiently, setting up tables and preparing for the day ahead. As Sarah led the woman to a quiet corner booth, Nate caught her eye, his expression a mixture of confusion and caution. Sarah gave him a subtle nod, signaling that everything was under control. Once seated, Sarah waved over Danny, who quickly brought 2 steaming cups of coffee. The woman wrapped her hands around the mug, as though seeking warmth, but didn't take a sip. "So," Sarah began, leaning back in her seat, "why don't we start with your name?" The woman hesitated before answering. "Miranda," she said finally. "Miranda Graves." "Well, Miranda," Sarah said, her tone neutral. "You've got my attention. What's on your mind?" Miranda took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on the dark liquid in her cup. "I wasn't always this person," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "The woman you saw last night. The entitled, arrogant version of me. That's not who I used to be." Sarah raised an eyebrow, but said nothing, letting Miranda continue. "Years ago, I worked in restaurants just like this one," Miranda admitted. "Waiting tables, bussing dishes, dealing with customers who thought they were better than me. It was hard, but I got through it. I promised myself that one day I'd climb out of that life and never look back." She paused, her fingers tightening around the mug. "And I did. I worked my way up, started my own business, and built a life for myself. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I was. Last night, when I walked into this place, I saw everything I used to be, and instead of respecting it, I lashed out. I don't know why. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I was ashamed. But whatever the reason, I was wrong." For a long moment, Sarah didn't respond. Miranda's confession was raw, and it caught her off guard. She had expected excuses, not honesty. But even as she listened, a part of her remained wary. "Words are easy," Sarah said finally, "but actions are what matter. You came here today looking for something, didn't you? What is it?" Miranda met her gaze, her expression earnest. "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe forgiveness. Maybe a chance to prove I'm not the person you saw last night. I don't have all the answers, but I know I want to do better." Sarah studied her carefully, searching for any signs of insincerity. What she saw surprised her, genuine regret, mixed with a determination that mirrored her own. "All right," Sarah said slowly. "If you're serious about making amends, you'll have to earn it. Respect isn't given, it's earned. Are you willing to do the work?" Miranda nodded without hesitation. "Yes, whatever it takes." Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "Then we'll see where this goes. But know this, if you're not serious, you'll find the door just as quickly as you did last night." A small smile tugged at Miranda's lips. "Fair enough." As Sarah stood to leave, she glanced back at Miranda, a flicker of curiosity stirring within her. People could change, but only if they truly wanted to. Time would tell if Miranda was one of those people. For now, Sarah was willing to give her the chance to try. The first steps. The following week passed in a blur of routine and quiet observation. True to her word, Miranda began showing up at Seraphine almost daily, though not as a customer. She appeared in the early mornings, long before the lunch rush, dressed in simple attire that was worlds apart from her designer wardrobe. She would sit quietly in the corner of the dining room, sipping coffee and occasionally jotting down notes in a small leather-bound journal. At first, the staff was wary. Nate kept a close eye on her, muttering to Sarah, "She's up to something." Nobody changes overnight. Even Donna, who was usually warm and forgiving, seemed hesitant, offering Miranda curt nods but little else. The rest of the team followed suit, their interactions polite but guarded. Sarah didn't intervene. She wanted to see what Miranda would do when faced with resistance. Actions spoke louder than words, and Miranda's next moves would determine whether she truly intended to make amends. On the fifth morning, Sarah found Miranda sitting near the kitchen door, her journal open but untouched. A stack of dirty dishes had been left on the table beside her, remnants of the staff's hurried breakfast before service. Without a word, Miranda stood, grabbed the plates, and carried them to the kitchen. The move was so unexpected that even Carlos, the head chef, paused mid-chop to watch her. Miranda glanced around, searching for the sink. When she spotted it, she hesitated for only a moment before rolling up her sleeves and beginning to wash the dishes. Carlos smirked, his booming voice cutting through the quiet. "You sure you want to do that? Don't think those nails are made for scrubbing." Miranda glanced at him, her expression wry. "They'll survive," she said, scrubbing vigorously. From her office, Sarah watched through the small kitchen window, a smile tugging at her lips. She wasn't sure if Miranda's actions were driven by guilt or genuine effort, but it was a start. Later that day, as the lunch crowd thinned, Miranda approached Sarah at the bar. I wanted to ask you something, she began hesitantly. Sarah wiped her hands on a towel, leaning against the counter. Go ahead. Miranda hesitated, as though searching for the right words. You said respect is earned, not given. I want to earn it, not just from you, but from your staff too. What can I do? Sarah regarded her thoughtfully. Miranda's tone was earnest, but sincerity alone wouldn't be enough to sway her employees. You need to understand what it's like to be in their shoes, Sarah said finally. If you want their respect, show them you're willing to do the work. Miranda straightened, a flicker of determination crossing her face. What kind of work? Sarah's lips curved into a small smile. Be here tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock. I'll show you. The next morning, Miranda arrived on time, her hair pulled back in a ponytail and her attire simple and practical. Sarah handed her an apron and led her into the kitchen. You'll be shadowing Dana today, Sarah explained. She'll show you the ropes. Dana raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Miranda followed her to the prep station. For the next several hours, Miranda learned the ins and outs of the restaurant, chopping vegetables, polishing silverware, and folding napkins. Her movements were awkward at first, but she didn't complain, even when she accidentally nicked her finger with a knife or spilled a tray of utensils. By midday, she was visibly exhausted but determined to keep going. Dana, who had remained cool and professional, finally softened. Not bad for a rookie, she said, handing Miranda a glass of water. Miranda smiled, wiping sweat from her brow. Thanks. I didn't realize how much work goes into all of this. Dana shrugged, her tone light. Most people don't. They think it's all smiles and serving food. Miranda's expression grew serious. I used to be one of those people. I'm trying to change that. Dana studied her for a moment before nodding. Keep at it. You might just get there. As the days turned into weeks, Miranda continued to integrate herself into the daily operations of Seraphine. She didn't shy away from the less glamorous tasks, whether it was scrubbing floors, organizing storage, or helping Danny carry heavy crates. Slowly but surely, the staff began to warm to her. Dana started chatting with her during breaks, and even Nate grudgingly admitted, she's putting in the effort. One evening, as the last diners were finishing their meals, Miranda lingered by the bar, observing the staff as they prepared to close. Sarah approached her, noting the tired lines around her eyes. You've been working hard, Sarah said. What's your goal here, Miranda? Really? Miranda looked at her, her gaze steady. I want to prove to you, and to myself, that I'm not the person I was that night, and I want to help. I know I can't erase what I said or did, but maybe I can contribute something meaningful. Sarah crossed her arms, leaning against the bar. And what does help look like to you? Miranda hesitated, then pulled out her journal. She opened it to a page filled with neatly written notes and diagrams. I've been thinking about starting a fund for your staff, she explained. Scholarships, emergency assistance, maybe even mental health resources. When I worked in restaurants, those were the things I needed most, but never had access to. Sarah studied the page, her expression unreadable. That's ambitious. I know, Miranda admitted. But I've done the research. I have the resources to make it happen, and I want to use them for something that matters. For a long moment, Sarah didn't respond. Finally, she closed the journal and handed it back. It's a good idea, she said. But if we do this, it's going to be a partnership. You don't get to swoop in and play savior. This is about the people who work here, not about you. Miranda nodded, her expression resolute. Agreed. Over the next few weeks, Miranda and Sarah began working together to outline the details of the fund. Their approaches often clashed. Miranda favored polished presentations and corporate efficiency, while Sarah prioritized grassroots involvement and personal connection. But despite their differences, they found common ground in their shared goal, creating a support system for the people who made Seraphine what it was. The staff, initially skeptical, began to take notice of Miranda's efforts. One evening, As they gathered for a staff meeting, Sarah introduced the fund, explaining its purpose and potential impact. Miranda stood quietly at the back of the room, letting Sarah take the lead. When the presentation ended, there was a moment of silence before Danny raised his hand. "So, this is really happening?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Sarah nodded. "It is, but it's going to take all of us working together to make it successful." As murmurs of approval rippled through the room, Sarah caught Miranda's eye. For the first time, she saw something in the woman's expression that surprised her: gratitude. That night, as Miranda helped clean up, she turned to Sarah, her voice quiet. "Thank you for giving me the chance to be part of this." Sarah looked at her, her expression softening. "You've earned it. But remember, respect isn't built in a day. It's earned over time, one step at a time." Miranda nodded, her determination unwavering. "Then I'll keep taking steps." Though Sarah still held on to a degree of caution, she couldn't deny that Miranda was proving herself in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, the first steps were the hardest to take. Breaking barriers. The fund had started to take shape, but its creation wasn't without its challenges. While Miranda had thrown herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even Sarah, the process of merging their vastly different worlds was far from smooth. Miranda's background in corporate business often clashed with Sarah's grassroots approach, and the tension between their styles became more apparent as they worked through the details. One afternoon, Sarah sat in her small office surrounded by stacks of papers and notes. The air was heavy with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a necessity for the long hours she was putting in. Across from her, Miranda sat with her tablet, meticulously reviewing a spreadsheet. "This proposal for emergency funds," Miranda said, her voice measured, "is a great idea, but it's lacking structure. If we don't set clear guidelines for how the money will be distributed, it could lead to misuse." Sarah looked up from her handwritten notes, raising an eyebrow. "Misuse? These are my employees we're talking about. They're like family to me. I trust them to use the funds responsibly." Miranda sighed, setting her tablet down. "It's not about trust, Sarah. It's about accountability. If we're going to ask donors or investors to contribute, they'll expect a formal process." Sarah leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "I don't want this fund to feel like a corporate bureaucracy. That's not what Seraphine is about. It's supposed to be a safety net, not a pile of red tape." The tension between them hung in the air, thick and unyielding. Miranda opened her mouth to respond, but Sarah held up a hand. "Let me explain something," Sarah said, her tone firm. "When I started this restaurant, I didn't have investors or spreadsheets. I had a dream and a whole lot of grit. This place is built on trust and relationships. That's what makes it special." Miranda hesitated, her expression softening. "I understand that," she said quietly, "and I respect it. But if we're going to scale this idea, we need to find a balance between heart and structure. We don't have to lose the spirit of what makes Seraphine unique. We just have to make it sustainable." Sarah studied Miranda for a long moment, her defenses slowly lowering. "Balance," she repeated. "That's not something I've ever been good at." Miranda's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Me neither. But maybe we can figure it out together." The following weeks were a crash course in compromise. Miranda adapted her corporate approach to fit the more personal ethos of the restaurant, while Sarah reluctantly conceded the importance of clear guidelines. They spent long hours drafting policies for the fund, often arguing over the smallest details but always finding common ground in the end. As the fund began to take shape, the staff started to take notice. Sarah had made it clear that the initiative was as much for them as it was for the restaurant's future, and their growing interest reflected their cautious hope. One evening, after the dinner rush had settled, Miranda approached Nate as he wiped down the bar. The younger server glanced at her, his expression wary. "Hey," Miranda said, her tone tentative. "Got a minute?" Nate shrugged, continuing to clean. "Sure. "What's up?" "I wanted to apologize," Miranda began, her voice steady but earnest, "for the way I acted when I first came here. I know I made a terrible impression, and I've been trying to make up for it ever since." Nate paused, his cloth stilling against the counter. "You've been working hard," he admitted. "I'll give you that. But words and effort only go so far. Why are you really doing all this?" Miranda hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Because I don't like the person I've become, and because I see what Sarah's built here. It's something real, something I want to support. I want to be part of something meaningful." Nate studied her for a moment before nodding. "Okay," he said simply. "Keep showing us who you are now, not who you were." Miranda smiled, relief flickering across her face. "Thanks, Nate." As she turned to leave, Nate called after her. "Hey, for what it's worth, I think you're doing a pretty good job so far." The breakthrough with Nate seemed to signal a turning point. Over time, the rest of the staff began to warm to Miranda, their initial skepticism giving way to cautious acceptance. She wasn't just a visitor anymore. She was becoming part of the team. One particularly busy night, Miranda worked alongside Dana in the kitchen, plating dishes and organizing orders. As the chaos of the dinner rush swirled around them, Dana glanced at Miranda, her expression thoughtful. "You know," Dana said, raising her voice over the clatter of pots and pans, "you're not half bad at this." Miranda laughed, a sound that was becoming more frequent. "Don't let Carlos hear you say that. He still thinks I'm hopeless." Dana grinned. "Carlos thinks everyone's hopeless until they prove him wrong." Miranda sobered slightly, her tone softening. "I don't know if I've proven anything yet, but I'm trying." Dana paused, setting down a plate, and turning to face Miranda. "You have," she said firmly. "It's not just about what you do here. It's about the fact that you're willing to show up and put in the work. That matters." The words hit Miranda harder than she expected. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she said quietly. The culmination of their efforts came 1 month later, when Sarah and Miranda hosted a meeting to formally introduce the Seraphine Staff Support Fund. The dining room was filled with employees and a few close patrons who had been invited to witness the announcement. Sarah stood at the front, her presence commanding yet warm. "This restaurant has always been more than a business to me," Sarah began, her voice steady. "It's a place where people can come together, support one another, and grow. This fund is an extension of that vision. It's about investing in the people who make this place what it is." She gestured to Miranda, who stepped forward, her expression calm but humble. "I want to thank Sarah for allowing me to be part of this journey," Miranda said. "This fund isn't about me or even about the restaurant. It's about you, the people who work here, who pour your hearts into this place every day. You deserve opportunities, support, and recognition, and I'm honored to help make that happen." The room erupted into applause, the sound filling the space with a sense of unity and hope. Sarah glanced at Miranda, her own smile reflecting a mix of pride and gratitude. That night, as the celebration wound down and the last of the staff headed home, Sarah and Miranda stood in the quiet dining room. The tables were empty, but the air was charged with the energy of the evening's success. "You did good," Sarah said, her voice soft but sincere. "So did you," Miranda replied. "This wouldn't have happened without you." Sarah tilted her head, studying Miranda. "Maybe not, but it also wouldn't have happened without you." Miranda smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Thank you for giving me the chance." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "You earned it." As they turned off the lights and locked the doors, Sarah felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey had been difficult, but it was far from over. For the first time, she saw not just the potential of the fund, but the potential in Miranda herself, a woman who had come to Seraphine with arrogance and left it with purpose. And for Sarah, that was the true measure of success. Confronting the past. A month had passed since the formal launch of the Seraphine Staff Support Fund. The restaurant thrived under Sarah's leadership, and the fund had begun making a tangible difference. 2 employees were already enrolled in professional training programs, while another received emergency medical assistance for a family member. The staff's morale was higher than ever, and Seraphine was abuzz with a new sense of purpose. Miranda, however, had started to wrestle with a quieter struggle. While she had thrown herself into the fund's operations with diligence, the cracks in her polished exterior began to show. Late nights reviewing proposals, early mornings helping in the kitchen, and the emotional weight of trying to prove herself were beginning to take their toll. Sarah noticed. She saw the exhaustion in Miranda's eyes, the way her hands sometimes trembled as she carried trays, the occasional moments when her confidence faltered. Miranda was working harder than ever, but something was holding her back. It was as though she was still running from a shadow she couldn't quite escape. One evening, after a particularly hectic dinner service, Sarah found Miranda sitting alone at the bar. The restaurant was empty, save for the 2 of them, and Miranda stared at the half-empty glass of water in front of her. Her shoulders slumped. "You look like you've been through a war," Sarah said, sliding onto the stool beside her. Miranda glanced up, offering a weak smile. "Feels like it." "You've been working harder than anyone," Sarah said, "but something's eating at you. What's going on?" Miranda hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of the glass. For a moment, Sarah thought she might brush the question off, but then Miranda sighed, her shoulders sagging further. "Do you ever feel like no matter what you do, you can't outrun your mistakes?" Miranda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah leaned back, crossing her arms. "I think everyone feels that way at some point, but the past doesn't define you, Miranda. How you choose to move forward does." Miranda let out a bitter laugh. "That's easier said than done." "Maybe," Sarah said, "but running from it won't help. Sometimes you have to face it head on." Miranda fell silent, her gaze dropping to the bar. Finally, she spoke. "There's something I haven't told you, something I've been avoiding." Sarah's expression didn't waver. "I'm listening." The next morning, Miranda arrived at Sarah's office, clutching an envelope in her hand. She looked hesitant but determined. "I want to show you something," she said. Sarah gestured for her to sit, watching as Miranda placed the envelope on the desk. Inside was a collection of photographs and documents. Sarah flipped through them, her brows furrowing. The photos showed a younger Miranda, dressed in the uniform of a waitress. The documents included pay stubs, termination letters, and handwritten notes of complaint. "I worked in a restaurant when I was younger," Miranda explained, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It was a small diner on the edge of town. I took the job to pay for school, but it wasn't just about the money. It was the only place that would hire me after I dropped out of college." Sarah glanced up, surprised. "Dropped out?" Miranda nodded. "My parents cut me off when I told them I didn't want to follow in their footsteps. They wanted me to be a lawyer, but I hated it. I wanted something different. Something simpler." She gestured to the photos. "That diner became my lifeline. The people I worked with, they were like a family to me. But one night, everything fell apart. A customer came in, drunk and belligerent. He started harassing one of the other waitresses, and when I stepped in to defend her, he turned on me. I lost my temper. I threw a drink in his face." Sarah's eyebrows lifted, but she didn't interrupt. "The owner fired me on the spot," Miranda continued. "Said I was a liability. I begged for another chance, but he wouldn't budge. I left that night humiliated, angry, and with no idea what to do next." She exhaled shakily, her gaze fixed on the desk. "That was the moment I decided I'd never let anyone see me as weak again. I buried that part of myself, the part that cared about people, about connection. I climbed the corporate ladder, made a name for myself, and told myself I was better off." Sarah leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. "But you weren't." Miranda shook her head. "No, I wasn't. And when I came here that first night, I saw everything I used to be, everything I gave up. It scared me. So I lashed out. Sarah regarded her for a long moment. Why are you telling me this now? Because I can't keep pretending, Miranda said. Not if I want to make this work. I want to stop running, Sarah. I want to be better. The following week, Miranda asked to meet with the staff. Sarah agreed, though she warned Miranda that she'd have to be honest. No pretense, Sarah said. They'll see through it. On the evening of the meeting, the staff gathered in the dining room, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. Miranda stood at the front, clutching the microphone with both hands. I wanted to talk to all of you tonight, she began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy radiating from her. Not as a businesswoman or a donor, but as a person. She took a deep breath. I haven't been honest with you, not completely. I came to Seraphine because I needed to prove something to myself. I thought that if I worked hard enough, I could erase the mistakes I made in the past. But I've realized that running from those mistakes isn't the answer. Owning them is. Miranda told them her story. The diner, the incident with the customer, her descent into the cold, corporate world. She spoke of her shame, her anger, and her determination to change. By the time she finished, the room was silent. Dana was the first to speak. So, what are you going to do about it? Miranda smiled faintly. I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep working, learning, and listening. I don't expect you to forgive me or trust me right away, but I hope, in time, I can earn it. The room remained quiet for a moment before Danny raised his hand. Can we still make you wash dishes when you screw up? The tension broke as laughter rippled through the group. Miranda laughed too, her relief palpable. Absolutely. That night, as Sarah and Miranda cleaned up the dining room, Sarah glanced at her, a hint of pride in her expression. You handled that well. Miranda shrugged, though a small smile tugged at her lips. It's a start. It is, Sarah agreed. But remember, this isn't the finish line. It's just another step. Miranda nodded, her determination unwavering. I'll keep taking them. As they turned off the lights and locked the doors, Sarah felt a renewed sense of optimism. Miranda had confronted her past, but the real work lay ahead. For Sarah, that was what mattered most, not where someone had been, but where they were willing to go. And Miranda, it seemed, was ready to go the distance. Building bridges. The next phase of the Seraphine Staff Support Fund brought new challenges, not just for the restaurant, but for Miranda and Sarah personally. With the fund gaining attention in the local community, Sarah had started receiving inquiries from other restaurant owners, curious about replicating the model. Meanwhile, Miranda's corporate connections expressed surprise and skepticism about her sudden involvement in a grassroots initiative. Why leave real estate for this? One of her former colleagues had asked during a networking event. Miranda, clad in her now familiar simple attire, had smiled and replied, because this feels real. But despite her confident front, Miranda still carried doubts. The wounds of her past lingered, and proving herself in the world of Seraphine required more than just effort. It required trust, something she was still learning to earn. One crisp autumn morning, Miranda and Sarah sat in the restaurant's office, reviewing plans for the fund's expansion. A new proposal lay between them, suggesting partnerships with local culinary schools and a mental health organization. This could be huge, Miranda said, her eyes lighting up as she scanned the document. It's exactly what we've been working toward. Sarah, leaning back in her chair, studied the proposal with a measured gaze. It's a big leap. We'll need buy-in from the staff before we commit. Miranda nodded. Agreed. They've earned a voice in this. That evening, the staff gathered for a meeting in the dining room. The team was a mix of seasoned veterans and newer hires, all brought together by a shared belief in Seraphine's mission. Sarah stood at the front, flanked by Miranda, who held a folder of materials for the presentation. Thanks for staying late, Sarah began, her tone warm. As most of you know, the support fund has been growing faster than we expected. We've received interest from organizations that want to partner with us, and we think this could open up incredible opportunities, not just for us, but for others in the industry. Miranda stepped forward, her voice steady as she outlined the proposed partnerships. We're looking at scholarships with local culinary schools, providing training for those who want to advance their careers. The mental health organization would offer workshops and counseling services, which we think could make a real difference, especially in an industry as demanding as ours. As she spoke, Miranda's passion was evident. She wasn't the aloof, entitled woman who had first walked into the restaurant. She was someone invested in making a difference. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before Donna raised her hand. "This sounds amazing," she said. "But how do we know these organizations will stay true to what Seraphine stands for? I don't want us to lose what makes this place special." Sarah smiled, her pride in Dana evident. "That's exactly the kind of question we need to ask. If we move forward, we'll keep you all involved every step of the way. This is your fund as much as it's ours." Nate leaned forward, his arms crossed. "And what happens if this gets too big? What if we lose control of it?" Miranda responded before Sarah could. "Then we'll scale it back," she said firmly. "The heart of this fund is Seraphine. If expansion ever threatens that, we'll stop. Period." Nate's eyes narrowed, but he nodded. "Fair enough." Over the next few weeks, the partnerships began to take shape. Sarah and Miranda worked tirelessly, attending meetings with potential collaborators and ensuring the fund's values remained intact. The process wasn't without friction. Sarah's skepticism about outside influence often clashed with Miranda's belief in the power of collaboration. "Not everyone out there shares your vision," Sarah said one evening after a particularly tense meeting with a corporate sponsor. "And not everyone is out to exploit us," Miranda countered. "We can't do this alone, Sarah. We need allies." Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I just don't want to compromise what we've built." Miranda softened, her voice gentle. "Neither do I. That's why I'm fighting so hard for this, to make sure we don't have to." As the partnerships moved forward, so did Miranda's integration into the Seraphine family. She wasn't just working alongside the staff, she was becoming one of them. One night, after a particularly grueling dinner rush, Carlos handed Miranda a plate of steaming risotto. "You've earned this," he said, his tone gruff but affectionate. "Best dish on the menu." Miranda laughed, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Thanks, Carlos. But if you're trying to butter me up, it's working." The camaraderie in the kitchen was echoed throughout the restaurant. Miranda's willingness to tackle any task, no matter how menial, had won over even the most skeptical employees. She wasn't just proving herself, she was rebuilding herself, piece by piece. The turning point came during a fundraising gala hosted by the restaurant to celebrate the fund's success. The dining room had been transformed, its usual rustic charm enhanced by elegant decorations and soft candlelight. Patrons mingled with staff, donors, and community leaders, all drawn by Seraphine's unique story. Miranda stood near the bar, wearing a simple but elegant dress, her hair swept back in a loose bun. She looked out over the crowd, a mix of pride and disbelief in her expression. "Surreal, isn't it?" Sarah said, appearing beside her. Miranda nodded. "A year ago, I never would have imagined this, any of this." Sarah smiled, her tone warm. "You've come a long way." "So have you," Miranda replied. "You've built something incredible here, Sarah." As the evening progressed, Sarah took the stage to deliver a speech. She spoke about the restaurant's journey, the challenges they had faced, and the people who had made it possible. When she mentioned Miranda's role in the fund's creation, the room erupted in applause. Miranda stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the recognition. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped forward, joining Sarah on stage. "This restaurant," Miranda began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, "is more than a place to eat. It's a community, a family. And being part of it has changed me in ways I can't fully express. I've learned that second chances aren't just about starting over. They're about proving you deserve them. And I'm grateful every day for the chance I've been given here." The applause that followed was thunderous. That night, as the gala wound down and the last guests departed, Miranda and Sarah sat together in the quiet dining room. The air was filled with the lingering scent of candles and fresh flowers, the glow of the evening still palpable. "You did good tonight," Sarah said, her voice soft. "So did you," Miranda replied. "This is your legacy, Sarah, and I'm honored to be part of it." Sarah studied her for a long moment, then extended her hand. "Here's to building something that lasts." Miranda took her hand, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "Here's to building something real." As they locked the doors and turned out the lights, Miranda felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she wasn't running from her past. She was walking toward a future she could be proud of, one step at a time, one bridge at a time.